These days, it's literally impossible to find a boxing fan who hasn't heard of Tyson Fury. The Gypsy King is a genius who is ahead of his time and has long ago outgrown the status of an ordinary athlete, becoming an icon of his era. At the same time, another no less outstanding in his achievements boxer followed his own path, Oleksandr Usyk. Unlike Tyson, the Ukrainian has no natural talent, but his endless diligence and fortitude brought him to the top of boxing.
Usyk working away furiously, shots underneath, Robert Bird has stepped in and has waved it off. In the 10th round of this contest, Oleksandr Usyk makes a successful third defense of his WBO.
But what should the two great boxers do now, when they beat everyone they could? There is only one way to find out. They should fight each other to win the unattainable, for almost 25 years, title of the undisputed heavyweight champion. But before that happens, let's remember what the guys had to do to get to that level.
Shots underneath, Robert Bird has stepped in and has waved it off in the 10th round.
And that's it, it's over.
Have a seat and make yourselves comfortable, friends. After all, the countdown to the Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk fight is just ahead of you. Please, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and also give us your likes and leave us a forward comment. Here we go. First, let's remember the thorny path of the champions to the coveted top. Oleksandr Usyk was born on January 17, 1987, in Simferopol. The future champion took boxing lessons at the age of 15, and at first trainings were very difficult, but over time he fell in love with the sport and began to give it his all. After 3 years, the guy went to major amateur competitions, starting a full-fledged career of a boxer. Tyson, in his turn, was born only in August 1988. Yes, the Gypsy King is younger than his future counterpart, but you couldn't tell. But his father already at the time saw his son as a fighter and named him after his favorite boxer, Mike Tyson. Fury was lucky to come from a family of hereditary fighters, so his future in the sport was predestined. As Usyk, the Brits started to compete in amateurs, but had only 35 fights on this level and rather quickly transitioned to the professionals. The Ukrainian, on the other hand, has been conquering the world of amateur boxing for years, won the European Championships, World Championships, and even became the Olympic champion in 2012, and then finally made a step to the professional boxing. Both guys achieved unreal success in their own divisions. Tyson defeated perennial irreplaceable king Wladimir Klitschko, beating half the division before that. After his triumph, the champion quit the sport for 3 years due to mental problems and difficulties defending his belts, but sensationally returned, beating 2 opponents to warm up. At the same time, Usyk defeated a couple of undefeated boxers, Mairis Briedis and Murat Gassiev, winning the title of the undisputed cruiserweight champion. Soon, Usyk came to defend his title against a tough Brit with a good record, Tony Bellew, who was on a 10-fight winning streak. In the early rounds, everything was not in favor of Usyk. He missed some unpleasant blows and could not find his rhythm, losing round after round, but gradually the Ukrainian found his range, and in the 8th round he delivered numerous long combinations and put an exclamation mark with the classic 1-2.
And then he nailed him right to the
After such a brilliant victory, Usyk was asked about his potential move to heavyweight, and the audience heard a pretty unambiguous answer from the Ukrainian's interpreter.
Yeah, we can do much in boxing, and bringing Usyk to heavyweights will bring some new spirit to heavyweight division, and he definitely needs to fight Anthony Joshua.
At that time, no one even thought about a fight with Fury. Everyone was interested only in the confrontation with Anthony Joshua, who held 3 belts, but a potential clash between Usyk and the Gypsy King was possible. And what was going on with Tyson at that time? As he overcame all the psychological problems, the British champion returned for new titles, and his goal was the WBC belt, the only one of the 4 main titles he had never held before. The holder of the coveted title at that time was the undefeated bronze bomber, Deontay Wilder, who was one of the few who posed a real threat to the Brit. The fight between Wilder and Fury was a real fantasy fight already on the paper, but what the guys presented in the ring surpassed all expectations. While the fight was going on the distance or going into a clinch, it was Tyson who led the dance, but in the 9th round outclassed Deontay by his technique and size. However, as if from out of the blue, the champion scored a knockdown. The bomber pointed his cannons at the target. Fury seemed to have learned his lesson and wouldn't be caught again, but in the final round he made another mistake and collapsed, only miraculously rising at the last second, just like in a blockbuster. In the end, the bout came down to a decision. The guys delivered an unforgettable performance, giving it their all, and for that the judges scored the fight as a draw, not identifying the strongest that night. After this tremendous brawl, the fight was definitely a rematch, but before that, Fury had time to warm up his fists, fighting with unbeaten German Thomas Schwartz, who had 24 fights on the winning streak. In 2 incomplete rounds, the skilled Brit absolutely destroyed his opponent. Fury showed how big the difference is between the talented newcomers and those who fight at the very top. After such an easy and short-lived fight, Tyson prepared for a super money fight with Deontay.
And then next year we're going to hunt down Deontay Wilder and make him give me that green belt.
To the great regret of all boxing fans, the new fight of the Gypsy King again was not against Wilder. The opponent of the former champion was the Swede Otto Wallin with the total record of 20-0. Most recently, Fury showed what he can do with unbeaten rookies. And has that dominance repeated now? Surprisingly, the first half of the fight Tyson didn't look like himself. He was missing quite a bit, and at one point he started to get some extremely serious cuts on his face. When the referee noticed what was going on, he invited a doctor to the ring, and at that moment the fans' hearts sank because the fight could have been stopped, the Swede would have won, and it could have been a real sensation. Luckily, the doctor was prudent and did not stop the fight. Sensing the coming collapse, Fury stepped on the gas and almost killed Otto in the 9th round, but still the fight went to a decision, and Tyson ended up with a 0 in the loss column.
He gets the win.
In his post-fight interview, the Gypsy King made a call-out that everyone was looking forward to.
Deontay Wilder, I want you next, bum!
And what did Oleksandr do at the same time? As promised, the Ukrainian warrior made the transition to the next weight class, and it did not take him much time to get into shape, 6 months to be exact. At the beginning of 2019, it was announced that the newly formed heavyweight Usyk would meet the famous French veteran Carlos Takam, but the Ukrainian hurt his biceps while preparing, and the fight was postponed, and later it was cancelled altogether. Tyrone Spong was ready to take over for Carlos, but he was not available. Then the matchmakers had to find a better match for the cruiserweight champion in face of Chaz Witherspoon, who has a decent record of 38-3. It became obvious that no one would give Usyk an easy fight in his new weight.
He's got him hurt right now. Usyk backs him up. Claudia, thank you so much.
We expected more power to try to hurt Witherspoon here.
Now the straight left hands.
Even with his newly gained pounds, Usyk was moving really fast. He gracefully maneuvered and avoided all the punches that his experienced opponent offered him, while he himself responded with his signature combinations.
And then a straight left to the midsection of Witherspoon.
Now he starts to pick it
In
up.
the 6th round, Alexander's advantage became huge. For 2 rounds, all he did was beating Witherspoon. After a barrage of punches from the Ukrainian, Chaz refused to go out in the 8th round, making his opponent the winner. When asked about the next opponent he wished to have as a next one, Usyk answered briefly and succinctly.
I think it's Joshua.
In the same days, Fury was already making full-scale preparations for his second fight with Wilder. The stakes were high because not only the title was up for grabs, but also the question of honor. Tyson wanted to prove to the whole world that the decision in the first fight was a mistake. The Brit was convinced that his skills were on a completely different level, and he was going to show it simply by destroying his opponent who had believed in himself. Everyone expected a close match, a competitive bone-to-bone fight, but this was pure domination. The Gypsy King had drastically changed his tactics after their first encounter, and this time he simply destroyed Deontay with his pressure and exhausting clinch. The final couple of punches were just a formal necessity for the Bronze Bomber, who was already barely standing. Besides the gift of a heartfelt song from the winner, the post-fight interview let everyone know who the driving force behind the entire heavyweight division was once again.
But I will say, the king has returned to the top of the throne.
After such victory, many roads were open for the Brit, such as titles unification with Anthony Joshua, but Tyson acknowledged the hype, accepted the trilogy with Wilder, and wanted to make it as soon as possible, but then the pandemic interfered and the third meeting in the ring was postponed. The coronavirus had affected people all over the world, but especially the athletes who could not perform as they were used to and had to look for any loopholes. So, Oleksandr Usyk, who had not fought for almost a year, found his opportunity for the comeback and announced his fight. Everyone was expecting a grand confrontation with Joshua, but we got a different match. Usyk versus Chisora. Derek is well known to the public for his numerous knockouts and losses by close decisions. He has fought all the tops of the weight class, including Fury, who gave him as many as 2 defeats. The veteran had less and less luck in recent years and now faced the daunting task of defending his position and defeating the cruiserweights champion who had just transitioned to their weight. Still, the switch to heavyweights created some challenges for Oleksandr. His size is not enough to compete with powerful heavyweights, and Derek Chisora showed that to the fans. He easily enough took his opponent in a clinch and did not let him to step back to the advantageous distance. Usyk's punches did not bother the Del Boy at all. Calmly missing some blows, he continued to go forward and perform his game plan, but even such tactics wore out the veteran by the equator of the meeting. In the second half of the bout, it was Oleksandr who dominated, going to his distance and shooting his opponent with precise series of shots. As a result, the fight went the full distance and the Ukrainian won by a unanimous decision. In the interview, besides answering the questions about the fight with Joshua or even Fury, Usyk clearly explained that his goals remained the same and he was preparing to reach the top of boxing.
Абсолютным чемпионом мира.
The undisputed heavyweight champion.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
No just world champion.
Not just world champion.
No just world champion. Undisputed world champion.
Brilliant.
As soon as the restrictions associated with the virus eased, the promoters took their chance and rushed to finally complete the Fury and Wilder trilogy. This time, the guys didn't fight anyone in between their fights and prepared exclusively for each other. Their decisive fight was organized on the T-Mobile Arena in the fall of 2021 and had to answer the question, was the second fight a mistake, or does Fury have no match? This time, the American knockout master decided to exhaust Fury with his bodywork, but in the end, by the third round, he got tired himself and collapsed in the knockdown. Everyone thought at that moment that it was going to be a repeat of the second fight, but Deontay pulled himself together and scored 2 brutal knockdowns in the third round. Wilder's moment of glory, but it didn't last long. Tyson came to his senses and openly dominated his opponent and finally finished him off in the penultimate round. Totally exhausted, Bomber collapsed on the floor after a right hook which marked the end of the fight. In his post-match interview, Tyson once again gave the fans a catchy song, but he kept his mouth shut about his next fight. The Gypsy King preferred not to think ahead because soon a new heavyweight champion would be revealed. Of course, we are talking about the confrontation between Usyk and Joshua. They had been talking about this fight for several years. Before his transition to the heavyweight division, Oleksandr said that he wished to meet with Anthony because they had met each other at the Olympics in 2012, but then they competed in different weight divisions, and now that fight has become a reality. At that moment, the British champion Joshua was on a series of 2 victories. After a revengeful victory to Andy Ruiz, AJ also knocked out Kubrat Pulev and became the favorite to fight the Ukrainian. The odds on Usyk were as high as plus 380, and that's for the Olympic champion and former undisputed champion of another weight class. It is clear that the lackluster fight against Chisora was the reason, but this underestimation might have played a cruel joke on everyone. In this fight, Usyk's form was on a different level. He was much faster and more agile than he was, putting Joshua in a daze. Anthony had never met such an agile opponent and simply didn't know what to do against him. While the Brit was in a stupor, the Ukrainian was firing on him with all his weapons and taking rounds. From the 6th to the 8th rounds, Oleksandr let his opponent work, but later he came back even stronger, and the final minutes of the fight looked like a sparring match between the champion and the newcomer. Joshua kept missing and backing away, and in the 12th round, only the bell that rang earlier than it should have saved him from the fall. With the decision of all the judges, Usyk took all 3 belts and became the new champion. The joy of victory overwhelmed Oleksandr, and in the interview after the victory, he could not talk about anything except getting back to his family. Even the rematch with Joshua, which was in his contract, did not bother the Ukrainian now. Usyk's victory caused a real public resonance. Some were shocked, others supported the new champion, but Tyson did not sit still and immediately decided to give a start to the promotion of their potential confrontation.
You know what I can't believe? That AJ has gone and give Ukraine all the heavyweight belts back after all my hard work of relieving them. You big useless dosser. You've let a little steroid man come up from middleweight and set about you and take all your belts. But it's going to have to take a real British Lancaster bomber like me to go and relieve the useless little steadhead of the belts and get them back to Britain.
Before that, the guys had already managed to meet each other at one of the tournaments, which caused an incredible excitement in the audience. But at that time, it was only a trash talk, and there was no question of a fight, even though all the fans would have been very happy to see the belts united after all these years. Unfortunately, instead, the guys got busy with their obligations to protect the regalia. Tyson took the fight with the Brit Dillian Whyte, who has gained momentum and won 12 of his last 13 fights, and he got his title shot after knocking out Povetkin. As expected, Whyte was not the man to impose his fight on Fury. In the beginning, Dillian had some good shots, but as soon as the Gypsy King gained momentum and began to force the issue, the Brit's defense cracked like the shell of a nut, and he was knocked out. On the press conference after the impressive knockout, the Brit suddenly gave a touching interview in which he said that his way is over and he ends his career.
Spent a lot of time on the road. I've been away a long time. I've fulfilled everything I've ever wanted to fulfill. I'm going to retire as the only second heavyweight in history after Rocky Marciano to retire undefeated.
Yes, the retirement news was really unexpected, but the Gypsy King did not disappear from the media space at all, but actively continued his attacks on Usyk while he was preparing for the rematch against Joshua. The second meeting of the Olympians was inevitable, and it took place in Saudi Arabia almost a year after their first fight. Joshua was able to really surprise. The former champion had a great change after their first fight, and now he masterfully used his size to cause Usyk problems. Anthony controlled the ring very well. He was pressing his opponent and destroying his body, but Oleksandr was able to engage in time and began to adjust. In addition, as time went by, the Brit became tired, and although he boxed well because of the mental strength, in the end he still lost on the 2 judges' cards in favor of the Ukrainian. A close and hard, but still a victory for Oleksandr. After his victory, he gave a candid interview in which he also made it clear who he wanted to fight against next.
I'm sure that Tyson Fury is not retired yet. I'm convinced he wants to fight me. I want to fight him. And if I'm not fighting Tyson Fury, I'm not fighting at all.
The Gypsy King did not ignore this and immediately commented on the victory of his future opponent and began to challenge him endlessly.
I just seen Joshua lose for the second time to Usyk out of his depth. However, England has been relieved of its belts yet again, as usual. But there is a remedy and a solution that I can suggest. If you want those belts back, then send in the Gypsy Barbarian of England. Come on! Send me in. Usyk, middleweight. You say you want the WBC, and it's held by gypsies. It is held by gypsies. It's held by the Gypsy King, and it's held tightly. Grasp tight. and all road leads to a 7-foot behemoth that will absolutely destroy you middleweight. Middleweight, you will get smashed to bits. You say you wanted to fight me after you beat the bodybuilder. Called me out on television.
We can say that Usyk listened to the request of his potential opponent and gave his opinion about him on the show.
Мы с ним договаривались, а он бегает куда-то и говорит, что я не хочу, типа,
I think we already agreed with him to fight, and now he's running and telling I don't want to fight him.
Oh, you think he's scared of you?
Думаешь, он боится?
Я это знаю.
I know that.
I'm going to get Usyk in an headlock when I see him and strangle the life out of him. Because he's a little bitch and he can't do nothing about it. Pussy boy.
Along with that, Fury returned to the sport and announced that he would end his trilogy with Derek Chisora, whom he had beaten twice before. This was clearly not the fight everyone expected, but Tyson's return, at least against the Del Boy, spoke to the fact that a bout with Usyk was becoming more possible. Derek couldn't capitalize on the chance to avenge his old losses to Tyson. The Brit was way too good for the tired veteran Del Boy. Throughout all the rounds, Chisora was missing a lot of heavy punches, and in the 10th round, after another unpleasant combination, the referee realized that Chisora had had enough and stopped the fight. Not the brightest victory for the Gypsy King, but the call-out that followed overshadowed the show completely. But even after that, Tyson did not calm down and continued to challenge Alexander.
I'll beat him. I'll take that little sausage out. He ain't got no kryptonite to me, he's fuck all to me, little fucker. And I'm gonna make him dance.
I think now that Fury is back and Usyk has his rematch with Joshua, it won't take long before this fight is organized, and for us, the fans, it will be unbelievable. Just imagine, 4 years ago, nobody even thought about the fight of the two best representatives of their weight classes. But today, Tyson Fury versus Oleksandr Usyk is already the biggest fight in the heavyweight division. The guys have been in the business for ages, and both have reached incredible heights, and now they have to take the last step to greatness. This step will go down in history forever, and will essentially answer the fundamental question: who is currently the strongest boxer of the 21st century?